Hello, I'm Hope Logan. I'm an actor on Bold and the Beautiful, and many people really love both me and our Bold and the Beautiful drama. So I've come here to share updates about my beloved Bold and the Beautiful. Everyone, please subscribe and support me. If you do, I will keep coming every day with new updates for you. The excitement surrounding the return of Hope for the Future had filled Zende Forrester with a sense of purpose he had not felt in months. For so long, his creativity had been trapped inside sketches, tucked away on forgotten shelves, designs waiting patiently for the chance to breathe under the spotlight. At last, that opportunity seemed to have arrived, and Zende could finally imagine his hard work walking down runways instead of gathering dust in a design studio. Every conversation about the collection reignited the passion that had nearly faded from his heart, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the future looked bright. But sometimes, the sweetest victories arrive only moments before devastating disappointment, and by the end of the week, everything Zende believed was about to happen would come crashing down around him. What should have been the beginning of his greatest professional triumph would instead become the moment that completely changed the course of his future. Not long ago, the disappointment began, when Steffi Forrester bluntly informed Hope Logan that Hope for the Future was being placed on hold indefinitely. The company had decided to shift its attention toward Eric Forrester's prestigious couture collection, leaving Hope's successful ready-to-wear line sitting on the sidelines with no clear promise of when it might return. The announcement landed like a crushing blow for everyone whose careers revolved around the collection, but perhaps no one felt the sting more deeply than Zende. His newest creations, poured from countless hours of inspiration and determination, suddenly had nowhere to go. Frustrated beyond measure, he confided in Carter Walton, admitting that he feared his designs would never see the light of day. Every dream he had attached to that collection suddenly felt as though it had been locked away behind closed doors. As if losing the collection wasn't frustrating enough, the situation only became more humiliating for Zende afterward. Instead of allowing him to continue focusing on his own creative vision, Forrester Creations reassigned him to assist R.J. Forrester with the men's line, reviewing R.J.'s work and helping bring his younger cousin's ideas to life. It was an assignment that quietly wounded Zende's pride because everyone knew he possessed far more experience than R.J. He had spent years proving himself inside the company, earning his place through dedication and talent. Yet somehow he found himself answering to Ridge and Brooke's beloved youngest son instead. The imbalance became impossible to ignore, and every passing day only deepened his resentment. Once again, Zende turned to Carter, pouring out his frustration over how unfair everything had become. Carter listened patiently, reminding him that hope for the future would eventually return, and encouraging him to hold on to faith that his moment would come, offering just enough reassurance to keep Zende from completely losing hope. Even while helping with Eric's couture collection, another truth became increasingly clear to Zende. Although he respected the elegance and prestige that couture represented, it simply wasn't where his heart belonged. Couture meant creating one-of-a-kind masterpieces for individual clients, each garment custom-made and impossible to duplicate. Ready-to-wear fashion, however, represented something entirely different, something far more meaningful to him. Those designs could be manufactured, shared, worn by countless people, allowing his creativity to become part of everyday lives instead of remaining exclusive to a privileged few. That philosophy perfectly matched the spirit of hope for the future, and it reminded Zende exactly why he longed to return to that collection. He wanted his work to inspire many people, not just a select few, and every day spent away from that vision only made him miss it more. The uncertainty surrounding the collection slowly became unbearable for everyone involved. Steffi refused to offer Hope or Zende any real timeline regarding when they could return to meaningful work, leaving both of them trapped in professional limbo. Hope found herself buried beneath meaningless assignments that failed to challenge her, while Zende remained stuck supporting RJ instead of pursuing his own creative ambitions. For an artist whose identity was tied to bringing ideas to life, watching his carefully crafted designs gather dust felt almost painful. Every unused sketch represented wasted inspiration, unrealized dreams, and countless hours of effort that seemed destined never to be appreciated. It wasn't simply about a delayed project anymore. It was about watching his own passion slowly fade beneath endless uncertainty. Ironically, many of the frustrations consuming Zende were almost identical to the struggles Hope had endured for years. Hope had spent far too long living beneath the constant threat of seeing her line canceled, enduring criticism, mockery, and dismissive treatment from Steffi, while constantly fighting for even the smallest opportunity. No matter how much she accomplished, she often found herself treated as though she were less important, simply because she carried the Logan name instead of Forrester. At Logan, however, everything had changed. There, Hope finally felt respected, appreciated, and genuinely supported, instead of constantly being reminded that she stood outside the powerful Forrester family circle. That contrast became impossible to ignore, and it ultimately reshaped her entire outlook on her future. Then, just when it seemed as though everything might finally be turning around, incredible news arrived for Zende. With Eric's couture collection officially launching, Steffi announced that Hope for the Future would finally be returning as well. The announcement alone was enough to fill him with excitement, but Ridge Forrester wasn't finished delivering surprises. Ridge explained that although Thomas Forrester continued producing excellent work from Paris, the company wanted someone based in Los Angeles leading the collection moving forward. Then came the words Zende had waited years to hear. Ridge offered him the position of lead designer for Hope for the Future, assuring him that no one had ever doubted his talent and acknowledging the passion he consistently displayed whenever he worked on the line. Steffi celebrated by bringing out champagne, and together they toasted to Zende's future. In that unforgettable moment, he truly believed he had reached the pinnacle of his career. Unfortunately, the celebration would barely have time to fade before disaster struck. By Friday, Katie Logan's highly anticipated launch event for the House of Logan collection would completely shatter everything Zende thought he had secured. Instead of unveiling a revived Hope for the Future under Forrester Creations, Hope would proudly introduce an entirely new fashion line at Logan. Even more shocking, the collection had been designed by her brother, Deke Sharp, proving that Hope had fully committed herself to building something entirely separate from her former employer. As the truth unfolded before everyone's eyes, Zende would realize that Hope had no intention of returning to Forrester Creations. The devastating reality quickly became unavoidable. Without Hope, there was no hope for the future, and the collection he had just been promised was effectively dead before it could even begin. The fallout promised to ignite an emotional storm throughout both companies. Brooke Logan would almost certainly explode with anger after realizing Katie had successfully built a future around Hope outside Forrester Creations. She would undoubtedly pressure her daughter to return, insisting that Hope belonged back where the collection had originally been created. But after everything Hope had endured, there seemed to be little chance she would willingly place herself beneath Steffi's authority again. At Logan, she had rediscovered confidence, independence, and genuine appreciation. She was once again collaborating with her brother Deke, receiving unwavering support from Katie Logan and Bill Spencer, and finally working in an environment where her ideas mattered. Why would she ever choose to abandon that newfound freedom? The family conflict would only become more explosive as Brooke confronted Katie over what she believed had been an unforgivable betrayal. From Brooke's perspective, Katie had taken far more than a business opportunity. In her eyes, Katie had already stolen the Logan family name's legacy, had once taken Eric from her, and now had effectively taken Hope as well. Katie, however, would calmly remind Brooke that she had honored every part of their agreement. She hadn't recruited a Forrester employee because Hope wasn't technically a Forrester at all. Hope had been born a Logan and had become a Spencer through marriage, making Katie's actions perfectly legitimate under the deal they had established. Brooke would likely dismiss that explanation entirely, arguing that the agreement itself had been built on false pretenses and therefore no longer deserved to be respected. If Brooke declared their pact officially over, she might even threaten to retaliate by aggressively recruiting Logan employees away from Katie's growing company. That possibility could quietly pave the way for an even bigger twist waiting just around the corner. Once Zende learned the complete truth, he would almost certainly feel betrayed enough to confront Hope personally. After all, only days earlier he had been promoted to lead designer because everyone believed Hope for the future was returning. Now, thanks to Hope's permanent departure, that opportunity had vanished before he ever truly had the chance to enjoy it. Carrying the weight of fresh disappointment, Zende might demand answers, wondering why Hope never warned him that she had already chosen a completely different future. For him, it would feel as though the dream he had just begun celebrating had been ripped away almost instantly. Hope, however, would likely stand firmly behind her decision, despite understanding his pain. She could gently explain that returning to Forrester Creations was never truly an option, because it simply wasn't a healthy environment anymore. Years of feeling diminished by Steffi's treatment had finally convinced her that she deserved something better. She had been forced to fire Deke, pressured into working alongside her former love, Thomas Forrester, and repeatedly denied meaningful control over the very collection that carried her name. At Logan, everything was different. She enjoyed encouragement instead of criticism, collaboration instead of control, and genuine investment instead of constant interference. Even while expressing sympathy for Zende losing his long-awaited promotion, Hope would remain convinced she had made the right choice for herself. From there, entirely new opportunities could begin unfolding for Zende. Deke Sharp, still relatively inexperienced as a designer, might openly admit that he wished someone with Zende's talent were working beside him. Carrying the pressure of leading an expanding fashion line alone had already begun weighing heavily on Deke, and having another accomplished designer share that responsibility would be invaluable. His admiration for Zende's skills could naturally evolve into an invitation to join the Logan team. At the same time, Katie herself might recognize a reflection of her own journey in Zende's frustrations. She could point out that both she and Hope once found themselves overlooked despite their hard work, constantly giving more than they received inside Forrester Creations. Seeing his potential, Katie might encourage him to consider a fresh start, promising that if he ever chose to leave, Logan would welcome him with open arms. Katie's offer could become even more tempting if she promised something Forrester Creations never truly had: a chance for Zende to build something entirely his own. Instead of forever supporting someone else's vision, he could become the lead designer of his own original fashion line, shaping every collection according to his personal creativity and artistic identity. It would be the very opportunity he had always hoped to receive, one that valued both his experience and his imagination. Meanwhile, back at Forrester Creations, outrage would continue spreading as employees condemned Hope for secretly leaving to work for what many viewed as the enemy. While some criticism would certainly be justified because Hope chose not to openly announce her resignation before making the transition, that secrecy would never erase the deeper truth. She had every reason to leave a workplace where she no longer felt respected or empowered. As the dust finally settled, Zende could find himself standing at the most important crossroads of his career. In only a matter of days, he would have experienced the emotional high of becoming lead designer and the crushing disappointment of watching that dream disappear before it even began. Looking across at Logan, he would see Hope thriving in an environment built on encouragement rather than competition, surrounded by people who genuinely believed in her potential. The contrast would force him to ask difficult questions about his own future, and whether loyalty to Forrester Creations was still worth sacrificing his ambitions. Unless Steffi and Ridge suddenly recognized his value by giving him a permanent line of his own, there would be very little keeping him tied to a company that had repeatedly overlooked him. And perhaps, after everything that had happened, the next great chapter of Zende Forrester's journey would not be written at Forrester Creations at all, but somewhere entirely new, where his talent could finally receive the respect it had always deserved.